Okay, it is party time. This is our last animal behavior lecture for spring 2020, and it goes very well with a more robust study guide. So very soon, on this very day, I'll also post the terms list that goes with this whole exam. And for all of the mating system stuff, it's unlike anything you've ever seen from me before. It has a lot more detail in it. Now, I think there's great value in that because I'm going to turn around and make you take a test, boom, like super fast. And I think that it would be good for you to have that kind of a terms list kind of right there, you know. I'm still saying take notes, draw the pictures that I draw, but definitely you're going to have a more robust and detailed terms list to go with this. So as I mentioned, we're now going into polygyny. And we'll spend the whole lecture basically on polygyny. We've already done monogamy, and we've already set the whole thing up with the power of sex. And we're really just sorting out here in this lecture the different ways that these extremely important decisions are made. So, here we go. We start here. We're dealing with mating systems. And in these mating systems, I guess we're going to call this part 2. And I guess the business before was part 1. We're going to get into something called resource defense polygyny. Resource defense polygyny. And we're going to be looking first at resources. So, defense of resources as they occur. Now, we're doing that because later on we're going to be talking about defense of resources that have been manipulated. That's coming. It's exciting. So defense of resources as they occur. And the first category for this is intrasexual. So we're dealing with intrasexual kinds of systems. And then later on, we'll deal with territoriality and hierarchies. So now, boom, finally, with all this crazy outline, I'm trying to make this go with the terms list. We have female defense polygyny. You know what polygyny is. And here we're talking about defending females. So this is the first one. This is like big stuff. All of this outline stuff is fine, but this is the big stuff. So female defense polygyny. Males form what we call tending bonds here. Tending bonds as the female approaches readiness. Now what I mean by readiness, that is readiness to reproduce. There's different kinds of things. This readiness, for instance, example in mammals, we call this estrus. In mammals, we call it estrus. You can even look at it in insects, my field of expertise. You call it sexual maturation. So that's kind of some of the concepts. Let's take a look at a couple of these. So if we look at a mammal, a great example is moose. Now, here you guys, we've got moose in our state. They've been brought back. How many of you ever seen or heard of moose? No, you haven't. That's not the way they go. You've definitely seen what you could call a herd of, which is of course a harem, of elk. And you've even seen probably pretty good sized groups of deer. Even smaller groups of mountain goats, like we saw in the video showcase. But you never see a whole bunch of these guys. And here's the deal. In the spring, in the spring, basically the male grows antlers, and he will then search for females. He'll search for females. This guy will search for females, and when he finds a female, he will tend her, whichever his female is, and then when she's ready, he'll mate. So these tending bonds, there's couples, very romantic. All right, so our next one is to take a look at insects, and there's a spectacular insect that does this. It's called the crab hole mosquito. And my, oh my, is this an amazing animal. The crab hole mosquito. So we're talking now about these land crabs that actually make these really cool burrows right along salt marshes, completely coastal. And we have these in our country, so therefore we have the crabs and the crab hole mosquito. And I've looked at these in Florida with one of my great, most awesome mentors named George O'Meara. And we've got this little story about the crab hole mosquito where here's this burrow. So here's kind of a cutaway view of a burrow of a crab. And this thing goes deep down, and then we've got water level. So we got water level that intertidally, the water could be quite high. The water can fluctuate. It can go even higher, even lower. And these little mosquito larvae, they're living in the water that's in the crab's burrow. And it's a really cool thing. But what happens here is that, I'm going to go up here, get some board. What happens here is that on the surface of the water, in this muddy kind of crab burrow, is where these mosquitoes are occurring. And you'll have a pupa. That's what a pupa, and that's a female pupa of a mosquito. And then up on the surface of this, you'll have a male mosquito that emerged earlier, and he has these really, really long palps, really long mouth parts. So he's up on the water, like this, skating on the water, and really long. This is his mouth parts, and he's kind of tending this female like I don't know, some sort of a water toy in the water, and he stays over her, and then when she emerges, which she eventually will do, so here's later in time, a frame later in time, she'll eventually emerge, and he's going to be right there for the process. Actually, they end up mating back to back. So here's the female on the water, here's the male on the water, and he has successfully copulated with this, but he's made that tending bond, and he defends it, because keep in mind that this is a little oversimplified. We have a whole bunch of mosquitoes in this little kind of tunnel of water, right? And a lot of them are completing their development and becoming pupae, and so this thing is just happening. Every once in a while there's a female that's ready to emerge. So there's going to be a competition for this, isn't there? The key is the tending bond. So that's our first example of what, and we call that example female defense polygyny. Okay. All right. By the way, just continuing that thing, we didn't see any mate choice here. You didn't see any mate choice. You didn't, the male didn't have choice of the female because there's a pupa, and the female certainly didn't have choice. When she comes up, he's the guy. All right, so we're going to move on now to number 2, which is called resource defense harems. And this is exciting stuff. Here we're going to have a single male that controls access to a highly, I'm going to emphasize highly localized resource. We're going to go right into a spectacular example, the elephant seal. I mentioned the elephant seal once before in lecture that are having these male contests, intrasexual battles at the beginning of the year. Let's take a look at the habitat of this thing. If we created a map of, or maybe a Google vision of where these guys breed, we would actually see, that there's these rocky cliffs along the ocean. So this is the top view of all these rocky cliffs along the ocean, and then every once in a while you'll have a little bit of beach that's kind of surrounded by cliff. Whoop, lost that one. And so all of these are potential habitats. Then, of course, you've got the crashing surf. Here's the waves coming in. This is the ocean. And then one of the key points is to actually have kind of a break. If you actually are working in an area that has excuse me. So here's maybe a reef-like structure or a sandbar. So I'm going to call this a big sandbar here. And maybe it doesn't go completely there. What I'm trying to show you is that not all habitats are the same. Here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3, here's number 4 over a stretch of beach. We're looking straight down on this. We're protected from terrestrial predators if the cliffs go right to the ocean, and that makes it really good. And if it's open, suppose that actually there's a little skinny bit of beach that goes this way. This is a less quality breeding site than this. So that's the whole idea, is that not all of these resources are equal. So therefore, the males are going to compete. And they're going to compete with these powerful kinds of fights. They're actually, though, as we talked about before, not bloody to the death fights. They're certainly bloody. These guys are really blubbery, fat mammals, right? So they can rip into their blubber, and they do, and you'll see that. But when they win the fight, they win the resource, and then all the females that go to that resource, they win. So we would draw a map of this. Here is going to be our kind of schematic system for this. We'll say, here's a big, huge male, and there's going to be several females. And then we'll separate this and say, okay, well, here's another one, big, huge male, and then whichever females, come and visit, that's going to be that harem. So each one of these is a harem, maintained by a big dominant male, and the best ones, the best territories have, cliffs that are protective, sandbars. You think about the different predatory threats on very, very young elephant seals. That's the tender morsel for a lot of predators. Orca. So orca's out here, potentially. And then, of course, various kinds of canids and other things that could come in along the road, along that little break right there in the sand. The cliffs would prevent them from getting there if it went all the way in. So etc. There's a variety of different kinds of resources here. So what we see in this system is kind of interesting. Often, in the case of the elephant seals, you'll see kind of an extreme sexual size dimorphism. You'll also see other systems that have a huge sexual dimorphism. It might just be, we're going to see sexual dimorphism throughout this whole day, but in this particular case, we're looking at these males can be something like, 3 to 8 times larger than their female counterparts. 3 to 8 times larger. They're massive. The males have these canines, and they aren't, like wicked canines, but they are. I mean, they just don't look that big in this giant blubbery mass. But they lunge into each other, and they kind of rip into kind of the neck region, which is all blubbery, and just constantly they have these ritualistic vocalizations, and they lean back, and then they bring in their massive bodies into each other in this particular process. So male fights, that is the deal. That's what drives the process. Get used to this kind of a depiction, a very graphic depiction. So this one is clearly what we're going to call resource defense harems. This is what this looks like. They aren't moving anywhere. There's no arrows that indicate moving. These females are in that beach area. That male is the guy that won it, and he therefore wins all of the mating activity there. Maybe there's some challenges, there usually are, but this is the story. Okay, good stuff. I think if we brought in the concept of female choice here. Now, in that tending bond business, we really didn't have any female choice at all. In this particular case, we do have a degree, because the females are actually kind of visit and select their, which harem that they're going to belong to, which is basically, they select the site. If you select the site, you select the harem. So females can visit and select the sites, and then, of course, they're selecting that harem. Very good stuff. Very cool. All right. Okay, continuing down the list, resource defense polygyny. So, resource defense polygyny, and continued. So now we're going to move into number 3. Number 3 is what we call the harem territory. And here you basically have the male defends an area that's large enough to supply several females. Okay, so that's how that looks. This is a very, very well-studied system. An example of this could be, the most famous one is the red deer. This actually is what we would call the Scottish elk. Scottish elk. Tremendous amount of study devoted to this animal. Some real pathfinding kind of ethology and sexual systems right here. Long studied systems. So, the Scottish elk is this extraordinary animal. First off, I'm going to draw what it looks like in terms of our map. So we're going to add something to it. Now we have our territories. So that's the big thing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to to highlight this concept of territory and say, okay, well, there's the territory, and we know that the territories are being defended. And let's draw one more just for fun. So here's the territory. So these are the territories. And then within the territories, you'll actually see your groups. So here would be a male, and that would be a harem. And so that male is working very, very hard to keep all these females in line. We'll have the same here. Here's the male, and then there are females here. And then same thing here. Here's this male with his harem, and we will have these females here. So the key is that this is the defended territory. So this whole group is moving along through time wherever it needs to in its territory, except these territories are vigorously defended. So in the case of the red deer, these males are extraordinarily busy. So in case of these dominant males that hold the harem, let's see, it's just incredible work. This male that holds the harem has just exhausting work. Exhausting work, and here's how he does it. The work that this guy does involves vocalizations. The vocalizations are called roaring. I don't know. This is really, really crazy to me. We, at least on our side of the pond, have usually reserved roaring for things that felids do. You know, cats. And then here we have an elk roaring. You can hear the commentator right now. Oh, look at that. He's roaring. He's roaring. I mean, it does kind of sound more like what the cow does. It's kind of like a... That's the roar. Of course, these guys are very closely related to our elk. And our elk exhibit the same exact system and do a lot of the same kinds of things. And we have bugling. What a glorious name for what they do. So these guys are bugling. They have other vocalizations as well. But roaring is the big one in the red elk. And the amount of roaring. I just did 2 roars. These guys do upwards of 3,000 per day. That is a lot of calories burned. So they're doing that. They are constantly kind of herding. So if the group is a little bit too sparse, they will constantly run around and pull everybody back in with roaring. So vocalizing, running around, etc., etc., etc. Very, very busy work. And then, of course, the thing is that here's the big deal. The big deal is be ready to mate when a female is ready. Because you got this big group, and you're going to do that. I think another thing that should be mentioned is there are young in these groups as well. The year-olds are there. In the time that the peak of all this mating stuff is going on. So you're making a generation, but that next generation up you've got with you. So it's a very dynamic group, but mating when ready is the key here. So that is the red deer. There's so much that you could learn if you crack into some of the literature on the red deer. Okay. The next one, I'm going to give another example. So this is our first example. Let's take a look now at another very famous example that everybody loves. So our next example here is going to be African lions. And so this is an interesting thing because we have some things to fold into the system. So here we actually have the male, and the male that has won the harem master has defended the king, Lion King. He defends this territory, and really the biggest part of defense is big time urination. For other aspects of defense, he's got some help, because the system here is that the females have their own, they have a hierarchy. We talked about hierarchy. It's called a pride, and we call it therefore a matrilineal pride. That's what these guys do, and it's going to be made of females plus cubs. The cubs are there, plus the male, plus, you know, the male, and let's see, where's he at? Plus that male. So this is an extraordinary system, because you also know that they have the advantages of group living, to where they can take a pretty impressive piece of food, something that has incredible biomass, and eat on it for a while and get incredibly just bloated out with all of this carry-on that they're taking. And then they just kind of lounge. You know, nobody really messes with the lions. But do the math. So they have an XY sex determination system just like us. So you go back to what we know about meiosis and making gametes, and females have XX and males XY, and we're going to end up, because of that 50% of every sperm that fertilizes an egg will end up making a female. 50% of every sperm that has a Y chromosome will make a male. So we have an expected, theoretical 1-to-1 sex ratio. That ain't 1-to-1. One male, many females. So what happens to those males? The males that aren't the Lion King, you know, the top guy, they get booted out. So they're bachelors, and they're surviving and predating and getting stronger. You see through time they kind of start to grow their, you know, their peach fuzz. They start to grow their manes, and they're looking mangy at the beginning, but then they fill out and get bigger and bigger. And they're eventually going to take a chance and try to win the position, except there are many females that have a different thought in mind. So the great kind of cinematographers, the documentary makers that have been just immersed in the African savannas, and almost to the point where they can point their cameras at lions and be almost amongst the lions, almost be accepted eventually. And these people are making these films, and a lot of great footage through the years has been recorded of these peripheral juvenile or younger males that are trying to make, you know, trying to take over, and they'll come in, and it turns out usually to be a battle royale, and he's not the one that's fighting it. They are whooping ass. They're whooping the ass of these young males, and they'll constantly do this, but eventually something's going to happen. Gosh, I saw some footage that was aired on a National Geographic program one time, where this guy was so old and haggard that he at the very end, he just kind of fell apart. Literally, his tail fell off as they were rolling footage. And he was definitely on his way out. And then, of course, it's a contest to replace. So this is a real spectacular dynamic in hierarchies. And again, though, it's polygyny. You've got one male at any given time that does all of the inseminating. And the stakes are high. I guess I should ask you guys, What would you rather be? Would you want to be a male lion in Africa, or do you want to be a female lion in Africa? Take your pick. All right. Number 4. Again, I guess I shouldn't have erased this. Resource, defense, polygyny. This is A, defense, resources as they occur. Continued again. Here's number 4. Number 4 is called the male matrix. This is great. I love the male matrix. So, males defend territories. And herds of females visit these territories. Oh yeah. Visit the territories. And they tend to visit the territories and kind of deplete the territories and like use all the resources, and then they go to another. This is awesome. So let's draw the map. So here is, I'll use the same kind of color coding. So here's our territories, and let's put another one in. Let's make it exciting. Give it some body here. As a matter of fact, let's even put 5 in. I can erase this. So I'll use purple to kind of show that, okay, these are the territories defended by males. So here's a male, here's a male, here's a male, here's a male, here's a male. And then there's a group of females, and all of these females are hanging out. They're a group. So right now they're in this guy's territory, these females. And then they'll consume, if they're in his territory and they become reproductively ready, then that's the male that will inseminate that particular female. But what's going to happen is that this herd's going to move along, and if things are getting a little scarce here in this territory, they'll move into this territory. And if you run out here, maybe get a mating or two, who knows, I'm going to go over here. I might go back over here because that was a good one. I might go over here. So through time, the female herd moves, but the males have to stay and defend their territories. That's a male matrix. Life in the matrix. So here's a classic examples of species that do this. Most of our African antelopes, most of our African antelopes do this. And then, interestingly, dragonflies. Now, you need a little bit more information on this dragonfly thing because it's going to shed some extraordinary new light on other, I mean, we're talking about living fossils. Dragonflies, they've been around forever, and man, do they have some bizarre sex. I gotta show you. So, okay, there's your drawing, male matrix. Let us see what this looks like. So, I'm going to draw a map of a kind of our typical top view map of kind of a body of water. This might be a pond, and in this pond we might actually have really, really good emergent vegetation all along this side. There might be some problems with it. It might have, kind of a rocky rubble kind of an area right here that has sparse vegetation, not a lot. Vegetation is the key, especially the stuff that we call emergent vegetation, because if you think about dragonflies, their offspring are aquatic, and they grasp onto plants, and they're predatory as young. And so not all territories are going to be kind of equal. So this might be an example of a pond. Therefore, we might see that at any given time, this might be a territory, this might be a territory, this might be a territory, this might even be kind of a crappy territory. Every day the game starts over again, however. The dragonflies are very, very impressive and aggressive flyers. So if you took a look at a dragonfly, looks like this. And they've got that's kind of what a dragonfly looks like, and it's a predator. So here's the point about a dragonfly. This is a male dragonfly that I've drawn right here. And the male has something up here at the front of his abdomen that's called secondary genitalia. And his real genitalia are right here. So here's his primary genitalia. And therefore, his testes are here. So this is where he makes gametes by meiosis. But what he has to do is, I'm going to show you, is he will actually fold his body around. I'll make this picture a little bit different. Fold his body around and kind of store packets of sperm here. Let's get another piece of colored chalk here. So then he's going to basically deposit sperm packets here. And now he's ready to go. And so this is a male. He's defending these territories. If you go sit at the side of one of these great ponds, like now, you'll see these dragonflies and you'll see chases. Maybe not quite now in abundance, but later in the summer it gets spectacular. And you'll see some of these aerial combats and chasing. And then they'll go and they'll perch on the vegetation, and it is just a spectacular, beautiful thing all day long. So here, keep this in mind. Here's these territories, males defending these territories. So I guess I could put male sign, male sign, male sign, male sign. Now the female, I guess the only difference with the official definition is that we don't have herds of female dragonflies. But we have female dragonflies that are patrolling the pond as well and flying into territories, and that's when it gets exciting. So males will basically capture a female and males will capture a female. Bear in mind that he's got sperm here, and so here comes the female. Sorry about the color coding, it's not quite, legit. So here's our female dragonfly, and actually he's got his claspers around her neck right here. So he's got a hold of her. They call this process tandem flight. And then he will go and fly to some emergent veg. So here's some emergent veg, and here is H2O. And then basically, just to show some of the processes, let's actually do this first. I just don't have as much space as I want, so I'm going to do it here. So the first move is we've got to inseminate this female. So he's going to curve around like this. She's going to curve around like this, and then her abdomen joins with where the sperm transfer occurs. So this is basically this is going to be our insemination, basically. That's happening here. Let's put his legs on the grass to show this, and then the next frame of this process is actually going to be, I'll throw that in right here. The next frame is for our male to still keeping his female captive. She's going to go and oviposit And so she's going to be depositing eggs right here under the water in the vegetation. In his territory. So through the course of time, a dominant male defends the best territories more of the day by day, getting more and more of the inseminations, getting more and more of his offspring into those particular the good territories. And so that's the game of fitness, is that the biggest, best male is the one that gets the job done. So that's that.
So here's a species of dragonflies that actually does not land on vegetation for oviposition, but they're clearly in tandem flight. The male is the red one in the front, and the female is in behind. And she's laying individual eggs with every dip.
So this is great. It's now time for us to continue the story. More and more beautiful systems. So our next one, number 5, is what we call a sublease territory. Whoa! And this one is cool too. In the sublease territory, here's what happens. A male's territory is divided. I'm going to use this classic symbol for division, is divided into several female territories. And let's look at this map. So here's a male's territory, here's a male's territory, maybe here's a male's territory. And again, I've been using purple to kind of show, oh yeah, that's the territory. Oops, excuse me, not that one, a male's territory. These are these male territories. So then we got big male, big male, big male, defining the territory. And then what we'll see is that one single female has a territory, and then another female, and then another female. So there are female territories within. And I'm drawing these kind of patchy. Classic, beautiful map of some really exciting stuff here. Now, I'm going to give you the absolute coolest example of this system. So this is a male, the purple is his territory, and then females have their smaller territories. And in certain circumstances, big territories, that's the key. Top of the food chain, that's when you have big territories. We've already talked about it briefly. You've seen it in the video showcase. And this makes us think of top predators. So the beautiful, beautiful example would be tigers. So let's get into that. I guess we're talking about Bengal tigers, but tigers in general. Okay, so here's what the tigers are therefore doing. You actually have this male tiger. They patrol by night or by day. I mean, they patrol a lot. And of course what they'll do, so this male, he's on patrol. He's going to do lots of urinating. He's going to visit this female. If there's no indication that she's ready for anything, he's probably not even going to deal with it at all because she's a badass. She whoops ass. He whoops ass. It's crazy. He's bigger, but they exhibit a lot of agnostic behavior. So that's within the species aggression. They're very aggressive animals. So he's cruising around, and then maybe this one is actually in estrus. He'll do these big, long patrols. Now, of course, what he's also doing along the way, spray that urine, spray that urine, spray that urine, because he has to clearly define his territory for that guy and anybody else who thinks they want to have a territory. So, same kind of thing. And then if we actually have a female in estrus, sparks are going to fly. It is ridiculous. I mean, he hangs out, she gets ready. The mating process is just a very, very short kind of dramatic event. It doesn't take a long time. And it usually ends with her screaming at him and clawing at him and then saying, just get the hell out of here, I'm done with you. It makes sense. What extraordinary animals we have. So this is what we call the sublease territory. Now there's another example, and this example is right here, right now. And we saw this on the video showcase. This animal is the red-winged blackbird. We got these guys right here. So red-winged blackbirds do this as well. And I guess that's pretty much all I would say about that. Maybe a little bit more. So we could actually go back to one of these habitats where we have a body of water and we have a whole bunch of cattail marshland. That's the perfect emergent vegetation, very, very cryptic. So all this vegetation around a pond, and what you might see is that that's one territory, that's one territory, that's one territory, that's one territory, that's one territory. The other thing is, just like always with all these systems so far, the males that don't win the territories, sometimes they're really young, by the way. There's kind of an age progression here. These are the males that kind of are on the periphery. They're always there, but it's actually just these dominant males that win territories that do this. This, of course, is sublease because inside of here we've got several little nests. And in the case of the red-winged blackbird, these little nests are carefully constructed nests on the bases of this kind of grass-like vegetation. So there's several females there, and then of course, you've got the one male. And the male has to do a lot. He actually vocalizes an awful lot. And when he vocalizes, the females are less commonly seen. And they're cryptic. They're cryptic in their kind of coloration and patterning of their plumage. But the males, jet black with beautiful red and yellow epaulets. Kind of like military hardware on your shoulders. Like, look at me, I rank. And so these guys are usually up at the tops of the vegetation, and they're vocalizing very specifically. This is my place. All the females there, you're in my place, we're together, this is what we do. And everybody else, when you hear this song, stay away, this is my place. Now, we did look, interestingly enough, in territoriality at those removal experiments. So I want you to remember that if we took a guy out, that the longer you kept him out, the harder it was to, if he even could, to regain his territory. Pretty cool. All right. So that's number 5. Now, I have to introduce. No, I'm gonna wait to introduce that. So that's this. Okay. So here is an insert. What I'm going to do is I'm going to insert polyandry. So there you know what that is. So that's many males. And we do have some polyandrous systems. So the polyandrous system that I'm going to talk about is actually a sublease. In a sublease. So, but in this case, it's a female territory. So the example would be the jacana. And the jacana is a bird. It's a Central America. Great name. For a bird, Central America, it's basically a role reversal. So what you'll have here is, it's a sublease, I'm just drawing a pond. And you'll have these kind of rafts. Each one of these is basically a floating barge to reproduce. And a male is working each one of these. The male is working these thatchy rafts, and then the female, she's basically, this is her place. The whole pond And so she's cruising around, and she'll mate, lay eggs, mate, lay eggs, mate, lay eggs. So here, that's the business. So, so the nests are constructed, which brings us into another concept: constructed kind of floating mats. And then the males hold these. The males are here. The males incubate. They basically tend. They construct. They do all the stuff. And then the female, she cruises around. The female visits these sublease holdings. Mate, lay, etc. One of the things that I don't really know about with the Jacana system, because I've never really just dived deeply into the literature, is what kind of parenthood do you have here? Are some of these guys just doing this? Are they just being completely exploited? In other words, is there a dominant male that that on his nest that somehow is the guy that has 80 or 90% of the offspring, and the other ones are doing it as well? Probably. That's kind of the way that birds do it anyway, right? You can't trust a bird. So anyway, that's a spectacular example. And another new concept, polyandry, and in this case, it is superimposed on the subleased territory. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to move into, let's see, make sure I got the right one. So we're still doing resource defense polygyny, and we're doing now we're moving into the new one. So I'll change the color for this. This is exciting. Roman numeral lowercase I. This is defense of collected or prepared resources. Yeah, this is awesome, awesome, awesome. So the classic example of this, you guys, is the bowerbird. Oh my, is this exciting. Bowerbird. Let's take a look at an example. So Vogel, Kops, bowerbird is this example. These guys have this great structure that they build in the forest. And I'm building it looks like a Gilligan's Island hut. This beautiful kind of carefully selected, it's very architecturally impressive. And these aren't small. And so there's usually a structure, like a pole that's kind of in the middle that holds the thing together. And so I guess the idea here would be that all of this space back here would be, in the back, this would be kind of the dark interior of this extraordinary space. And then what you'll see is this glorious bird out front. So here he is. And he thinks he's something else. And he thinks he's something else, and he is. So he's constantly working the scene, this bowerbird. And these bowerbirds have, kind of yellow-green. They aren't really spectacular in their plumage, so to speak. But this is kind of what the bowerbird looks like. Whoa, whoa. And so our bowerbird, our sexy, sexy bowerbird, actually not so sexy to the eye himself, but what he makes is sexy. He has all of this great stuff. He might have been out collecting these beautiful little blossoms. These are all little flower blossoms, and he's carefully tended this pile right out to the the front of his bower. And of course there might be some little parts here. Maybe over here, what you're seeing actually today, because it's just crazy world we live in. This plastic thing, gosh, does it have to stop? But I mean, I'm sorry about the sideline, but take a little inventory of your plastic use. I mean, we recycle, yeah. The recycling system is completely overloaded. And we just continue to come up with more and more ways to make plastic containers and to make products, be fresh and consumable forever. Plastic. Well, the bowerbirds are into the plastic. So here might be the bowerbird that has carefully selected these little pieces of blue plastic. And they're just precise and perfect. Beautiful pieces of that. Then maybe it goes over here for some other gorgeous stuff. It's common to see the elytra, which are kind of the hardened, the hardened mesothoracic wing valves of beetles. And this one is a very striated one, and I'm showing you here a pile of collected stuff. So here's this bowerbird. He also has some vocalizations. I'm sing, come here, look at my stuff. I've got this, and this. I'm a provider. Collected resources. Very, very impressive. That's the bower. And by the way, just for size reference, I mean, this is pretty big. There is a classic kind of BBC production with David Attenborough going up to one of these bowers, and by the time he got close enough, you could think, God, you could kind of get on your side and crawl in and get a night's shelter here. These are really large things. So that is impressive, and it is what we call defensive collected or prepared resources. Okay. Now, it's time for us to move into another thing. Wow, look at, there's my bower. If I take all of my little chalks and I get them just aligned perfectly, got to constantly tend, just like the bowerbird. Look at here. Get them all organized. And this is what bowerbirds do all day long. That's what they do. Oops. Keep losing them. Okay, there we go. Look at, behold, that's my chalk bower. Maybe if I show them to my wife, she'll realize that she made a good choice. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move on into to elect polygyny. So till now, with the exception of the polyandry, the female was monopolized. And then now, so next for us is females not monopolized. Okay, and in this particular case, we're going to look at, so it's still an example of resource defense, so it's an example of resource defense polygyny. Defense polygyny, and this is going to be female not monopolized. Monopoly comes when you have a resource. That's what the whole game is about. It's about resources. And when you're not monopolized, there's not like a food issue. There's not a protected beach area issue. There's not a whole bunch of territory for you to be a predator. That's a food issue. So we're talking about when they're not monopolized. And then there are classic examples of this. Our first one is called lek polygyny. And in the lek polygyny, basically groups of males, you've seen this before, groups of males gather at what's called a common display site. It's a lek. And this site has nothing to do, just to find mates, to select mates. That's the only thing this has value for, these leks. And the cool thing, let's draw the map. So here, you would technically have very small temporary male territories within a lek at any given time. So there's a little male, there's a little male. They actually have some territorial, like little confrontations. You saw some bumping in the video showcase of the sage grouse. Here we go, here we go. They're usually fairly well clustered. Oh, these are supposed to be males. What am I doing? Okay, these are all little males with their little territories. The females don't exhibit any territorial behavior, any agnostic behavior at all. They're just there to kind of pick a good male to mate with. So here's what this looks like at any given time. And then the females just kind of come in and they just check it out. The females are here, and the females are evaluating and making choices. There's actually some pretty good courtship action here. Remember, so the lek people have been, kind of continually weighing in and observing and coming up with overarching ideas to describe these phenomena. Of course, there are hypotheses. So the first one is the hot spot hypothesis. And in the hot spot hypothesis, the idea is that males gather where females are. So basically, males gather where females are. I was a player in the hot spot hypothesis back in the disco era. So I lived in a little town in Nebraska, western Nebraska, about 3 hours kind of north, a little bit east of Denver. And it's called Scottsbluff, as I mentioned. And we had this kind of discotheque that came in about 1980. And it was called Jeremiah's. And you could go there. And of course, this was for kids. It was like a skating rink, but it was for disco dancing. And so it wasn't like a bar or anything. But man, that was the hot spot. If you had any hopes of finding a girlfriend, you better get your butt down to the hot to the hot spot. Matter of fact, though, that wasn't all that it took. You had to be pretty social, and you had to have a few moves. You know what I'm saying? Man, I got so mad because this kid who was kind of interested in the same girl that I was, he had a sister, and they ordered off of TV like this disco dance instruction kit, and you put this plastic thing on the floor, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has all your steps. So these guys were like getting their steps down, and they could do the whole thing. And I didn't have that, and I didn't win the mate. Not that it would have been mating at that time anyway. I think it was only 16. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Let's do the next one. The hot shot hypothesis. The hot shot hypothesis is that females like to compare. Females compare, and they pick the best, whatever that means, whatever that means in the case. And actually, this is a very good idea. The hot spot hypothesis would imply that if you're there, you're going to have an equal chance. If you're the hot shot, which I suppose is what that kid became when he learned the dance steps, the hot shot hypothesis is that the females compare and they pick the best. This one tends to get a lot of support because you'll see that the fatherhood is very disproportionate in some of these leks. You have one male winning 80% of all of the copulations, even though there's 15 to 20 males on site, all trying to attract mates and mate. That's that. Okay, the last one. This is this one has a different name. It's called a female preference hypothesis, which is a bit misleading. Basically, the idea here is that the males cluster because larger leks attract more females. So females are preferring large groups of males so they can make a good choice. It's not quite coming out in the name. But anyway, males are clustering, and the larger their groups, the idea is that larger leks, is what I'm saying here, larger leks attract more females. It kind of makes sense, you know. Okay, so that's lekking. So continuing, resource Sys Poly not monopolized. Continue with number 2. Number 2 is choruses. Choruses are really cool. Choruses would be exhibit something that we call scramble competition. Crazy. So you have no direct confrontations. You have males actively search for mates without conflict. You have that's it. Great examples of this. So the first one, let's take a look at kind of what it is then. Let's look at, that's what scramble competition is. Examples of scramble competition would be garter snakes in the spring. You saw that in the video showcase. So we have the garter snake, that massive kind of thermoregulatory phenomenon, subterranean. And then they come out and they're this giant snake ball. Good grief, the video showcase, there must have been tens of thousands of snakes in that ball. And of course, when they come out in the spring, it's mating time, so this is what it is. Garter snakes in the spring. Another classic example, and this one is quite freaky, the brittle star. Now we're in the ocean. Finally, we kind of dermata, the brittle star, and seeing masses of brittle stars is just kind of, it's a sight to behold for sure, and I've never seen it live, I've only seen it on the screen, but oh my, it is extraordinary, brittle stars. And then, of course, we can't go without mentioning the famous ones that I've already talked briefly about. Mosquito swarming behavior. So the swarms, and just to let you know a little bit about this, this is crazy stuff, you guys. I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about mosquito swarming behavior. The thing is that males swarm. Many species do this kind of, I would say, crepuscular. So you remember our biological rhythm part where we had dawn and dusk, and the dusk one is the big one. So these are swarming They really swarm just kind of at, they call them swarm markers, but it can move, it's dynamic, and here they are swarming. And the males have these special abilities to hear the females. If you actually took a look at a male, this is the proximate causation business. The male mosquito, he's got all very, very, very hairy plumose antennae. Very hairy plumose antennae. And then this is the male. And then the female mosquito, she's got, the female mosquito, she's got these pretty simple antennae. And what we actually have here is these special structures that I mentioned back in lecture, Johnston's organs. And basically what happens, when her wings beat, they are putting forth sound. I know we're dipping into proximate causation here. They're putting out sound that these structures are perfectly tuned to. And again, if you think about this from the proximate perspective, if this male was flying this way and a female came this way, this one would be more stimulated than this. So we're talking about a tropotaxis. We're talking about basically bilateral receptors and the ability to respond. This should make you think about the moth and the bat. The moth evading the bat. Well, here it's a positive attraction. The male flies beeline, tackles the female mosquito in midair, and then tries to position himself underneath her. At this point, females are doing all the flying. The male's not flying anymore, really. He's just grappling on. And then he positions his genitalia, and then usually they'll go and, I mean, they can hover and be in the air and get a lot of this done in the air, but a lot of times the deed is completed on some substrate that they land on. Female has absolutely no choice in this. The male has only the competition of being first there and then being able to pull it off, being able to actually tackle and get into position is the whole nature. This is called a scramble competition. So it's quite spectacular. I wanted to let you know that these mating systems are being exploited in today's world. And at some future time in our relationships, maybe you'll see a documentary that I'm working on, but I visited a place in Brazil, labs in Brazil, where they are actually releasing male mosquitoes, as well as California. Heck, I was there. They're releasing male mosquitoes, and these mosquitoes have been rendered sterile from a bacterium called Wolbachia. And so these guys will actually mate with a female, and this is the point I'm trying to make, this female right here, she's monogamous. And what I mean by this, when the male inseminates her, active biochemistry shuts her down from receiving another mate for life. She stores her sperm for life in special structures called spermatheci. They're inside of the abdomen. And so therefore, one mating, she's got a lifetime supply of sperm, and therefore she is able to make all of the future offspring that she would make. Not a lot of mosquitoes live long enough to have one blood meal leading to a whole mass of eggs, but some are. Of course, you have to be a vector. You got to have one blood meal to get it and one to give it. So the longer you live and the more blood meals you have, you're never going to run out of sperm, however. And that's the story here. But the idea is that if this male transmits those biochemistry, that biochemical cocktail that shuts her down from receiving another male, and the offspring that would have formed from that sexual union never form, that is spectacular. And of course, they're even exploiting this phenomenon with bizarre molecular biology techniques where instead of a sterile male, you actually have a male that the female produces offspring, but there's a gene that basically causes termination late in larvalhood in the mosquito. It's radical, awesome tech wars being applied to the fight against mosquitoes. Exciting, exciting times. So there we have that. I made a mistake, but I'm not going back. I'm just going to tell you. So before, I had the word choruses, and then I had scramble competition. Well, we did that. That's check mark. But we did not do this. We need to do that. And so here we go. So sorry about that. I get too excited. Whenever I get around mosquitoes, you know, it's kind of like, oh, I got to get there. So I did, and that cost me a bit. So now we're actually going to talk about choruses. Okay. Of course, one thing that will straighten me out here is the beautiful terms list. It's all organized. So here we have choruses. This is kind of a polygyny combo. It's a polygyny combo because what you're going to see here is you're going to see male contests, so intersexual contests, and you're going to see female choice. And the classic example that we would talk about here would be bullfrogs. And the bullfrogs, you're going to see some interesting things here. Chorusing is going to involve vocalization. And if you haven't experienced the vocalizations of chorusing in a beautiful setting with no kind of human light pollution or anything, it's a nocturnal thing, you can find it very easily this summer. It's just a glorious thing. You can also find chorusing going on throughout the afternoon and the day. The Western chorus frog, aptly named. Cute little frog. You can find that in many, many little urban parks right here in the greater Denver metropolitan area. Matter of fact, we were supposed to go to one of those, and we would have heard those extraordinary little, and it's just great little animals. So anyway, back to the bull. We're going to do bullfrogs, not Western chorus frogs. So we'll see in the bullfrog, we kind of looked at what they had. Here is going to be kind of part of our day. They're nocturnal, so I'm just going to show you basically dusk and dawn. And what you'll see in these in these animals is that, so we're dark all the way. As a matter of fact, we're becoming dark here. I'm not showing the rest of it, and then we're becoming light. So this shows you that I'm not showing the whole deal. I'm not showing the whole 24-hour period. This is dusk, this is dawn, and here's what happens. They start and they finish. So they really just peak throughout the night. The intensity, therefore, is right here midnight. And what's going on is that the males' choruses are indicating a couple of things. They have territories. They hold territories. These are 2 to 7 meters in diameter. By the way, bullfrogs are huge. I mean, if you ever see a bullfrog kind of pollywog or tadpole, whatever you want to call it, if you see, they're at least the size of a golf ball, and sometimes like a modest-sized pear. Massive. So anyway, they hold territories and they're vocalizing, and then they're also attracting. So the females are actually kind of shopping around, and it's this chorus that's part of the deal. So the female will shop, they'll come there, and the process will be the female will tap the male that's selected. There'll be a courtship call by the male, and then eventually we'll have mount, clasp. All of this stuff is going on, and this is amplexus, right? You know, they don't copulate. So mount and clasp, and then while under clasp, the female will oviposit in his territory. That's the whole key, and then he'll inseminate gel massive numbers of eggs, 5,000 to 20,000 eggs. Wow, wow, wow! Again, and that's what happens. Now, the whole thing about this territoriality is the reason for giving that detail. So this territoriality is really important because you're going to find out that the biggest territories, so the best places, and these are the hardest won. These are the ones that again, there's not everybody is equal here, so here you're going to have the best would be sunny and shallow. Sunny and shallow, basically higher temperature. So higher temp because of and a higher rate of development. Higher development rate, and also you're going to see a reduction in leeches, which are major predators. So reduction in leeches in the sunny, warm areas. So sunny, shallow, I should say warmer waters. Those are the best territories. Those are the ones where the dominant males win and hold, and then the dominant females get more of these females that are going about the process of shopping. That's how the chorus works, and that is great. All right, so the last thing for me to basically do to finish this whole thing up is just tell you a little bit, going back to monogamy, and it's in monogamy very often where we see some of the most extraordinary courtships, which we define as stereotypic precopulatory behavior. This is fantastic stuff. And if there's a hall of fame of courtships, there's all sorts of great things that happen here, but my goodness, there are birds of paradise. Whoa. There's...
And here's a spectacular example. Victoria's rifle bird from northern Australia. Just enjoy.
The first thing that I ever did as a scientist was to describe the courtship behavior. The courtship behavior of these Sabbathese mosquitoes. Now, this isn't a Hall of Fame, but in terms of mosquitoes, it's the pinnacle. Matter of fact, I was able to describe this as a grad student with my advisor, and we are the authors that first recorded in the history of science courtship behavior being exhibited by mosquitoes, because most of them are scramble competitors like we just talked about. So Sabbathese is the genus. Of course, one of the most famous ones, which I would think is the bird of paradise of mosquitoes, is Sabbathese cyaneus. Extraordinary mosquitoes. So I'm probably going to throw a little bit of clips and music together if I can, show you a couple of extraordinary courtship behaviors. We need to maybe end this class on that super high and super beautiful note.
So here we are, Sabbathese cyaneus, an extraordinarily beautiful, iridescent jungle mosquito. This is a courting pair, and the male is on the right. You can see the end of his abdomen is swollen. There's kind of an orange structure. He's behaving now to bring her abdomen in position. But he's not ready to make his move. We called this free leg waving. You can see that one mid-leg with a paddle is free and the other is attached to her wing. And now he attempts copulation. Look at his proboscis. Yes! Success! But he's not inseminating her yet. We call this superficial genital coupling. The orange bit is his gonostylus, but he's got a lot of work to do before he can inseminate her. Keep your eye on the mid-leg that's attached to her wing. And there it goes. He releases and engages in the wave. Both his paddled mid-legs and his hind legs in exquisite rhythmic motion. Boom! And that is it. He's shifted. We called it the genital shift, and now he's inseminating her. We call the whole behavior the waggle. Notice an alternating movement of the right and left side of his body. One of her only behaviors in this process is agnostic. Because when she's had enough, she'll kick him away.
I think that in some ironic way that this coronavirus thing has it's been tough, and we can't take that away. But I think that all of us have found different degrees of strengths. Maybe even we could identify these as superpowers that you never knew that you had. In my class, I have provided you with a situation that requires a tremendous amount of self-discipline and no relative measurement, because you can't just go see somebody else and say, oh my God, that student's got good notes, or that student's, really preparing because they keep asking questions and I'm not. That kind of thing actually keeps you on your game in higher education, and I think most of us like the campus and the social aspect of college education because of that. And now here you are, clamped up in these strange little chambers. I mean, mine's one of the funkiest ones of all, my basement, but I love it. It has enabled me to maybe kind of reassess some of the material, refamiliarize, extend my knowledge I think that's been a good thing. There's something about me putting that science out, that expertise out in a recorded lecture as opposed to, a regular classroom lecture that kind of raises the bar. It's out there now. I better make sure that I know my stuff, or remember my stuff, because some of this stuff is pretty old for me. And so I did. Anyway, I really, really, really hope that wherever you're at now, that you do not lose sight of your academic goals, your future goals, and that you make all plans to continue to engage in that, because this is a beautiful thing that we do. We are working on this thing by gathering all this new information, and it gives you a much better set of tools with which to navigate through everything, including pandemics. Who knows? We may have another in our lifetimes like this. So, having said all of that, I really enjoyed getting to know you, and sometimes it might have only been, of course, I got to know you physically in the beginning. I got your names down. You were the first class of all my classes that I did, because I love animal behavior, and I love animal behavior students. You guys are cool. But after that, I could see your initials in a circle on my Teams screen. I'm not even going to see your face, but I could hear your voice. And man, that meant a lot to me. We shared a lot of good stuff. I think we've had some fun. I tried to make these as fun as I could. They've been making me laugh. They've been making my wife laugh, so that's enough for me. But if they made you laugh, that's what I did it for. Anyway, laugh more and stay strong. And I really, really hope to see you guys this way or virtually in the future. On our beautiful campus, on our screens, whatever the case is, I hope to see you. I hope to see you continuing to go down this path. I'm here. Will be here or there. Let me know if I can help you. And as you make your decisions as to whether or not to enroll in the fall, for instance, if you have questions about that, ask me. I might even shop some classes of mine to you in the next week, so you can look for an email. Okay, sorry about that ramble. You've been an awesome class, and I again hope that you are well and that you are ready to just whoop ass. That's what we need to do. Whoop ass.